Now, although I know that I need to embrace the nerd within me, eyeglasses and all, I don't really see myself as being all that smart. However, I do know that there are many people who would be considered smart, but they greatly lack in their usage of basic common sense, which is why I'd rather listen to a wise person over a supposedly smart person. And one thing that is questioned by those who have basic common sense is, why is it that we still have apes or primates in existence today if humans are said to have evolved from primates? And if humans have not replaced primates, we still have primates in existence as well as humans who supposedly evolved from primates, then why don't we still have the intermediate creatures or those transitional links between man and ape? I mean, we have man and we still have apes. So what happened to the ape man? I mean, if the ape man is more advanced or more evolved than the ape, shouldn't the ape man still be in existence today? And why is it that when we look at art and images from over 4,000 years ago, or the beginning of civilization that has been recorded, we see images of man which pretty much look like the modern Homo sapiens of today? Well, you see, this is the reason why our school textbooks will teach us today that the earth and life on earth has existed for millions and billions of years, although the Bible states that man has only been in existence for like 6,000 years, a little over 4,000 years since the Great Deluge or the Great Flood spoken of in the Bible book of Genesis.
I think someone's trying to make a monkey out of us. Was your ancestor an ape-like creature? I don't think so. Let's talk about a few of the so-called cavemen. We could spend hours on this topic, but we got more to cover here. Nebraska man was used for years as evidence for evolution. All they found for Nebraska man was one tooth. That is the entire Nebraska man right there. One tooth. Then they built an entire man from that one tooth and later made him a wife. Now you have to really be good to know what his wife looks like from his tooth. Okay, but these are professionals, don't question them, okay? They know what they're talking about. Later they found out the tooth actually came from a pig. There's the real Nebraska man right there. How about Piltdown man, named after the gravel pit it was found in Piltdown, England. Somebody took a human skull and an ape's jaw, they filed them down and fooled everybody. In 1912, they discovered the Piltdown man. It was in the New York Times. Darwin theory proved true from the Piltdown man. It was going to be used in 1925 at the Scopes monkey trial as part of the evidence for evolution. But the judge said the question is not, is there evidence for evolution? The question is, did he violate the law of teaching? So he was found guilty of breaking the law. The teacher was John T. Scopes down here in Dayton, Tennessee. But Piltdown man was a hoax. Somebody had taken an ape's jawbone and a human skull, broke the TMJs off, made them fit together, and fooled everybody, filed the teeth down. For 40 years, it was in the textbooks as proof for evolution. It was a fraud, exposed as a fraud, 1953. Neanderthal man is still in your textbooks, used in your town here in Knoxville, Tennessee. But it's been proven years ago it cannot possibly be a missing link. Back in 1856, they found a skeleton petrified, a man petrified, in this valley called the Neander Valley, and they named it Neanderthal man. The back was bent over. Well, apes walk on 4 legs and man walks on 2, so when the Darwin's theory became popular, they resurrected the Neanderthal man and said, oh wow, maybe he's slowly evolved and he's coming up. Well, they've known from the very beginning it was an old man with arthritis who's slowly going down. He's not coming up at all. He's headed down. But they still keep him in the textbooks. About 300 Neanderthals have been found. Their brains are bigger than ours. Their bone structure was incredibly strong. They said they had so many muscles that the average Neanderthal could probably pick up the average NFL linebacker and fling him over the goalpost. Phenomenal strength in the Neanderthals. They gave the same skull to 9 different artists and said, what did he look like in life? They got 9 different answers. They said, what would you like him to look like? We're artists, you know. We can make him, you want him ape-like or human-like? You tell us what you want. We'll do it. Jack Cuazzo, a friend of mine from New Jersey, has been a dentist for 32 years. He came and spoke at our conference a few weeks ago at the boot camp we had in Pensacola. He studied the actual Neanderthal skulls in Europe. He said these Neanderthals are just perfectly normal humans that are living to really great age. See, before the flood came, the people lived to be 900. After the flood, lifespans dropped off to 400, and then 200, and then 100. But that's still a long time to live. And it's a simple fact, the bones of your eyebrow ridge never stop growing. So if you could live to be 300 or 400 years old, your eyebrow ridge would stick way out. People today that use their jaws a lot, like the Aborigines in Australia, are always using their jaws as a vice. They don't carry a toolbox with them. Their eyebrow ridge sticks out really far because of the chewing muscles. It pulls on the bone. The Neanderthals are perfectly normal human that are living to be 200 or 300 years old. That's all they are. Their brain's bigger than ours. They're not subhuman at all. They're just really old human. There's an Aborigine on the far left over there. See the eyebrow ridge sticking out? That's from chewing or using your jaw muscles a lot. There are a lot of different shapes of head. You could line up the folks in Knoxville, Tennessee and prove evolution just by the shape of the skull and drive downtown. You'll see what I'm talking about, okay? Here's Cro-Magnon man, still used in the textbooks, yet it's perfectly normal human. Why on earth is that considered a missing link? They've got one in there called Homo sapien is modern man. He's listed as Cro-Magnon. It's not modern, it's not a missing link at all. One they've got in there now is called Australopithecus afarensis. That was proven wrong in 1973. 30 years ago, proven wrong. Why are they keeping that in the textbooks as evidence for evolution? They've got Australopithecus africanus, or afarensis, better known as Lucy. How many have ever heard of Lucy before? Donald Johanson found Lucy in 1974, Ethiopia. He had gone there with a grant to look for missing links. Somebody gave him some money, said, here, go find a missing link. If you don't find one, no more money. 2 weeks before his grant money expired, he discovered Lucy. Highly motivated, I suspect. And that would be a suspect, by the way, in a court of law, you know. Lucy was 3 feet tall. It was obviously a chimpanzee of some kind. Now, the bones of the skull were crushed thoroughly. Could not tell anything about the skull. But when they put it together for your kid's textbook, they can make it half human, half ape. They named it Lucy because they were listening to the song, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Very popular back then, which, by the way, has the initials LSD, which they must have been on when they found this thing. But the knee joint that was labeled Lucy's knee in National Geographic was actually found 1.5 miles away and 200 feet deeper. But National Geographic labeled it Lucy's knee. It's not Lucy's knee. It's 1.5 miles away, for heaven's sake, okay? There's quite a controversy about that knee joint still. But the knee joint is the best evidence they have that Lucy was becoming a human. Because an ape has the lower and upper leg that are in a straight line with each other. A human leg goes up to your knee and angles off to the side because your hips are wider than your knees. Lucy's knee angled off to the side, the femur angled. And Donald said, see, that proves she's becoming a human. No. Any monkey that climbs trees has an angled femur. What he found was a tree-climbing monkey. It's not proof it's becoming a human. He said, well, the bones are slightly bigger than a regular ape. Well, that's true. It doesn't prove it's becoming a human. The bones of a Clydesdale are slightly bigger than a regular horse. It doesn't prove it's becoming a truck, for heaven's sake, okay? What he found was a heavy-duty chimpanzee, and probably the pre-flood chimpanzees and everything was probably more heavy-duty. If they're living longer, much healthier, that's all he found. There are big horses and little horses today, by the way. St. Louis Zoo put human feet on their Lucy display. Not one foot bone or hand bone was found. Not one. Every other Australopithecine that's been found has curled toes. Professor Menton at Washington University said, the statue is a complete misrepresentation. That's a big fancy word for lie. I prefer smaller words. It's a lie. The zoo director said, zoo officials have no plans to knuckle under. We cannot be updating every exhibit based on every new piece of evidence. We look at the overall exhibit and the impression it creates, and we think this impression it creates is correct. Bruce, are you telling me you would lie to kids coming through your zoo just to get an impression across to them that evolution is true? You mean your theory is more important than the facts? That's exactly correct. They will lie to the kids going through these science centers and zoos to make them believe this evolution theory. And there are lies in the textbooks, like 60 of them. We covered that on video number 4, lies in the textbooks. In Africa, they found perfectly normal human footprints in a layer of ash that had turned to stone. Perfectly normal human footprints. But the footprints were in ash, supposed to be 3¾ million years old. They studied the footprints and said, wow, these footprints are exactly the same as ours today. Russell Tuttle, University of Chicago, studied the footprints carefully. He went and found a place where people never wear shoes. They never wear shoes, ever. And he studied their footprints. He had them run through the mud, walk through the mud, jog through the mud, trot, skip. He said the footprints of these people that never wear shoes are exactly like the footprints found in Laetoli, Africa. Identical. And then he said, if the Laetoli footprints were not known to be so old, we would conclude they were made by a member of our own genus. In other words, if we didn't know better, we would think a human made these. Well, how do you know better? Oh, because the rock is too old. This is an example of where the evolution theory is a hindrance to common sense and to scientific research. It's one of the greatest hindrances to science. It's not part of science. It's counterproductive to science. Then National Geographic put human ape-like mixture features on these creatures walking through this ash. Now, keep in mind, not one bone was found. No bones are found. If you find perfectly normal human footprints, what would justify you putting dark-skinned, ape-like creatures walking there on your drawing? And if I was African American, I'd get upset that they always use dark skin on the missing links. Like if some kind of, darker skin is less evolved. That's what they're trying to imply here. And why did they add this toe separation? Notice the big toe is separated away from the rest of them on the picture. They did it on purpose because it's a real serious problem going from an ape-like foot to a human foot. Apes have a toe that sticks off to the side like a thumb. That's so they can grab a tree branch and hang by their back feet. You can't do that. Okay? If you want to practice it, I'd suggest you start on a low branch for practice, okay? You're going to hurt your head. But here they have 4 million years of bipedalism, and they gave every one of these so-called missing links human feet. Because the foot is a serious problem for the evolutionist. Charles Oxnard studied Lucy and said the bones of Lucy represent an animal that is not in the line of humans. It's not a missing link. He did a computer multivariate analysis of the bones, okay? There could be these creatures, the little ape-like creatures that walk upright, still alive in Sumatra today. Lucy may represent an animal that is still alive. Peking man was used for years as evidence for evolution. Everything disappeared during World War II. But they found a cave with a bunch of crushed monkey skulls in there. The skull had been smashed, and they found a bunch of human tools. And so some brilliant scientist said, wow, these monkeys are learning to make tools. Oh, and they're practicing on their head. Yeah, that's a good one. Let's keep that one right over here. Well, duh. They didn't tell anybody. They found 10 normal humans in the same cave, skeletons of humans. See, in some cultures, they like to eat monkey brains. You ever seen Indiana Jones? Mm-hmm. They just found a cave where they were eating monkeys. That's where they had their feasts or something. It's not a missing link. Homo erectus is still in the textbooks. Homo erectus used to be called Java man. Then they changed it to Pithecanthropus erectus and now called Homo erectus. It was found by Dr. Dubois, a Dutch anatomist, who went to Indonesia purposely to try to find missing links. He hired a bunch of prison convicts to go dig for him. He wasn't even there when they found it. What they found was an ape's skull cap, 3 human teeth, and a thigh bone found a year later 50 feet away. Dubois put them all together and said, we have a missing link here. You don't even know those animal bones go together. 3 teeth, thigh bone, and a skull cap from an ape. This was also going to be used in 1925 as evidence for evolution at the Scopes monkey trial. The Java man. The famous anatomist Virchow said, in my opinion, this creature is an animal, a giant gibbon. In fact, the thigh bone has not the slightest connection with the skull. Dubois hid the fact that he found 2 human skulls in the same area. He put those under his bed, under the floor. Like Edgar Allan Poe, Telltale Heart, only this was Telltale Head. There's no evidence of how man evolved at all. Fossil evidence for evolution for humans is fragmentary. Fossil evidence of chimpanzee evolution is absent altogether. There is no evidence of how chimpanzees evolved. In Skull, they were going to have a big display of the Orc Man, O-R-C-E, the Orse Man. They were going to have a big party for the Orse Man they discovered, until they discovered it's actually a piece of a skull fragment from a donkey 4 months old. That was going to be the missing link. A dolphin's rib had been labeled as human collarbone in the museum for a long time, until somebody said, oh, that's a dolphin's rib, that's not a human collarbone. The Hobbit was just found here in 2004. The Hobbit was a little bitty, tiny human, probably a result of secondary microcephaly dwarfism. Just a normal human, about 3.5 feet tall. There are people like that today running around the planet. Okay? There's a good book on the so-called cavemen, if you want to read this. If you're being taught this in school, get the book by Marvin Lubenow, Bones of Contention. Excellent book. It'll really put everything into perspective for you. The only missing link I can find is up between these guys' ears. You know, something is missing. Some of these professors spend all their free time digging in the dirt looking for bones. My dog does the same thing. But we don't make the taxpayers pay his salary while he does it, okay? Now, most states have laws requiring textbooks to be accurate. Florida has one, California has one, Texas has one, Wisconsin has one, Alabama has one. The law says textbooks should be accurate. Minnesota says teachers shall not deliberately suppress or distort subject matter. But Minnesota textbooks are still teaching all these as evidence for evolution, when all the ones in the red circle have been proven they cannot possibly be a missing link. By the way, the Minnesota textbook, and most textbooks now, instead of calling man Homo sapien, like we used to be called, they're now called Homo sapiens sapien. Wow, what's that mean? Well, sapien means wise. So we're the wise man. See, the Bible says, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. And if you think your grandpa swung by his tail from a tree, you're a fool. Plain and simple, okay?
Now, there are millions of Christians who believe that although the earth is very old, like millions of years old, they believe that humans are relatively young. And many have adopted the day-age theory. And with this, they believe that each day in the first creation story of the Bible does not represent a literal 24-hour day. Like, when the Bible speaks of the first day, the second day, the third day, that it is not speaking of a literal 24-hour day, but an age or a more extended period of time, a longer period of time. Like when a person says, back in my day, you know, they're not talking about a literal 24-hour day, but a lengthier period of time, like an era of time. And considering that I had studied with Jehovah's Witnesses, I used to also believe that the day-age theory may be accurate. However, I've been listening to some of the lectures by ministers like Kent Hovind, and I began to reconsider the day-age theory. Now, who is Kent Hovind? Well, Kent Hovind is a Christian Science evangelist, and in his ministry, he uses scientific facts and data to support the Bible and the teachings of a young earth. Now, this minister, he was recently released from prison after serving a 10-year sentence for tax evasion, yada, yada, yada. But many conspiracy theorists, they believe that he was imprisoned or targeted because in his ministries, he would be exposing the New World Order, you know, in relation to the Illuminati and all that, and sharing information that the worldly powers that be do not want the public to be informed of. Now, you may be asking, why is Lashid promoting this white man? And there are some who felt that with my series on ancient Egypt, I used the quotes and information of too many Caucasian writers, historians, anthropologists, etc. And some have criticized me for not quoting more information from Africoid or black historians, scholars, etc. And I can totally understand them questioning me on this. But understand that much of what we have initially learned on ancient Egypt and history in general was initially taught to us by the Caucasoid. So I personally believe that it is more effective to use some of their own teachings or the information that they have presented to debunk the misinformation that has been implanted within many of us since we were very young children. Also, it cannot be said that I am just coming from some Afrocentric bias, although I do indeed have a bias in presenting my information or presenting my opinion, just as you have a bias, or you are coming from a biased perspective when you are trying to tell me that the ancient Egyptians were not black, or what you would refer to as Negro. However, I am able to back up my bias or opinions with information that has been documented as factual. I'm not just giving you this information saying that this is true or this is factual just because I say so. Okay? And I am presenting information that is coming primarily from your people. I'm speaking to the Caucasoids now. Also, I know that there are many people, unfortunately, and many of my own people, who will not believe information that is presented to them unless it comes from a more Caucasoid source. Now, that is not the case with myself, because like I've said, I appreciate wisdom over intellect. And this is not to say that blacks do not possess intellect or that whites don't apply common sense. But I will generalize in saying that I know how many of my people have been brainwashed to not trust their own people or our own sources when it comes to historical and scientific data or information. Plus, I do have a certain respect for Minister Kent Hovind. I believe that he has good intentions, although, of course, I'm not on the exact page as he when it comes to all that he believes regarding the Bible. But I will be quoting and sharing much of what he's expressed and information that he has presented in his ministries. And I will also be reading from the Jehovah's Witness publication, particularly this one, Life, How Did It Get Here by Evolution or Creation. Now, this was initially published in 1985. And I remember when they completed the book, like as part of their book study in the 80s. Although I didn't get a copy of this book until around the early to mid 90s. And I must say that this book, more than any of their other Jehovah's Witness publications, this has strengthened my faith in God and belief in the Bible more than any of their other publications that are, not the Bible. And although I'm not a Jehovah's Witness, and I can't say that I'm in total agreement with Jehovah's Witnesses on everything, I will always appreciate what I've learned from studying with them and attending their meetings. That's one thing that I really like about Jehovah's Witnesses and the Kingdom Hall meetings and Watchtower publications. I mean, you are going to learn studying with Jehovah's Witnesses and attending the Kingdom Halls, unlike what I've experienced the times that I have attended churches. And you're literally doing homework with those Watchtower and book study publications. And the Bible is always being quoted in their meetings, and you're always having to turn to Bible scriptures. Even when there's a sermon given, like on Sunday, they're going to have you continuously turn into scriptures, unlike how it is with most churches I've attended. Also, the Jehovah's Witnesses, they also go to a lot of secular references for information, like the Encyclopedia Britannica and a lot of, let's say, publications from anthropologists, historians, etc. So they know how to balance out the biblical information, the information that is coming more directly from the scriptures, as well as the secular information or the more scholastic information. And that is something that I appreciate about studying with Jehovah's Witnesses. They really do their research and they really learn. You really learn in the Kingdom Hall meetings. Unlike how it is with most churches that I have attended. Like they may say one or two scriptures and the rest is the pastor or the preacher is talking. With most churches, it's more about the charismatic pastor or preacher and the choir. Like it's more for entertainment. But those of the Jehovah's Witness Kingdom Hall, they may criticize the church as not teaching enough about the Bible and what it actually says. And some church people, they may criticize the Kingdom Halls or the Jehovah's Witnesses for being too much like a classroom and not giving enough praise. They may see Jehovah's Witnesses as being too robotic, almost code-like. But I kind of understand where both sides are coming from, because I do love the sound of more soulful gospel singing, singing that would move me more in a church. And for anyone who knows Jehovah's Witnesses, you know that they object anything that is associated with the church, including gospel music. I remember I was having to turn down the Clark Sisters song when I lived with my auntie, and that song you Are the Sunshine, I believe that was the name of it. When that would come on the radio, and I'd really want to hear that song, but when I lived with my auntie and my grandmother with Jehovah's Witnesses and my uncle, we had to turn down the radio. So yeah, that I do like about the churches. I do love hearing soulful gospel singing, especially considering that I am a black person, a descendant of slaves, or people who were forced to be slaves. I'm a black person who yearns to have my soul reached. However, I am more grateful that I attended the Kingdom Hall and had actually learned more. Although I know that there are some of us who prefer to stay naive and we just want to have our ears tickled. But I am going to be sharing what I have learned, particularly from this Life, Evolution, or Creation book, as well as from some of Kent Hovind's ministries, and understand that this knowledge was being spread before there was YouTube or any knowing of an internet, just as I was made aware of Hebrew Israelites being the so-called Negroes as far back as the late 80s, before I even knew about an internet. But now we are in the information age where we have the internet and we have access to so much information, and we have quicker access to so many books, publications, and information, like with Google Books. So I'm really trying to take advantage of this, as all of us should. But anyways, in 1770, during the Enlightenment era, French naturalist Georges Buffon, if I'm saying the name correctly, said the earth was 70,000 years old. Now, before the Enlightenment era, most naturalists even believed that the earth was only a few thousand years old, which goes along with what the Bible says in regards to the age of the earth, at least by my understanding of the Bible, although there are those who do believe in the day-age theory when speaking of the Bible in the days of creation. Now, as stated at a Berkeley education site, in the 1600s, most naturalists believed the world was a few thousand years old and that species were created separately and organized into an unchanging hierarchy, with humans positioned just below the angels. And in the 1800s, Charles Darwin described a world that was inconceivably old, one in which life gradually changed from one form to another without any need for direct supernatural intervention. But before Darwin, the French naturalist and mathematician Georges Buffon had made claims that the Earth was approximately 70,000 years old. It is stated that he used the new physics of Isaac Newton to conjecture how matter in motion might have formed the Earth. He proposed that a comet striking the sun had broken off debris that became the planets of the solar system. Initially, the Earth was scorching, but gradually it cooled until molten rock turned into dry land and clouds rained down to form oceans. Buffon estimated the entire process took over 70,000 years. Now, understand that Buffon was one of the thinkers of the Enlightenment era. And when you think of enlightenment, think illuminated. Now, he went against the churches, or what the Bible taught, on the age of the earth, proclaiming it to be 70,000 years old instead of a few thousand years old. In 1770, he made this proclamation. Now, it's also interesting to know that the Illuminati secret society was also founded around that time during the Enlightenment era, or in 1776. That's when the Bavarian Illuminati secret society was founded. And Illuminati, that basically means the bearers of light, or the enlightened ones. And y'all have to understand that there is exoteric knowledge and there is esoteric knowledge. Now, the exoteric knowledge is basically the so-called knowledge that they will choose or concoct to feed to the masses. It is that exo or surface knowledge, like the education that we receive from our public schools, colleges, and universities, and even from the media. But then there is that esoteric knowledge. That is the knowledge that is more beneath the surface, the knowledge that is only meant for a small, select group of people. It is more secretive knowledge. Now, how do I better describe this? Okay, like, I may teach to a group of really young children that the color of the waters of the earth is blue. And this is generally accepted by those children as being a fact. I mean, this is how water is usually shown and painted on maps, etc. But there are those few adult teachers who know that water is actually clear, and the bodies of water in the earth, they appear blue, giving a reflection of the sky. But we decide to not tell the children this, at least not yet, because we want them to keep coloring the pictures of water in their coloring books blue. We want them to keep coloring water with a blue crayon. That's kind of what I mean when I speak of exoteric knowledge, or what is fed to the masses, versus esoteric knowledge, which is more secretive. You see, they are going to tell the masses that we are all a result of evolution, and make claims that all of the information that they present to us is purely the result of scientific research. But if persons of the Enlightenment era, such as Sir Isaac Newton and former President Benjamin Franklin, if they were really strictly just about science, and they had no beliefs in anything supernatural, then why were they dabbling in occultism? And note, if you look up the word occult, you will find that one of the words used to define occult is secret. Okay? And you will find that many of the scientists, etc., in history, whom we have taken so much information from, they have actually dealt in some form of occultism. They have that secret, supposed esoteric knowledge. But there is that exoteric information or knowledge that they have decided to feed to the public or the masses of people, and we, for the most part, accept that. And understand that many of those who were of the Enlightenment era, they were very much against the church, and it was their mission to destroy all teachings of the Bible, and to totally dismantle the church and its entire influence. But that did not mean that these persons had absolutely no beliefs in the supernatural now. Don't fall for that. And there are a lot of those who are coming at me. They're trying to use big scientific terms, thinking that they can blind me with science, you know. But I'm just gonna come back at you with the data, but not just the data, but I'm also gonna come with the common sense, okay? I'm going to come with the wisdom, and I'm going to come with the common sense, okay? But anyways, back in 1770, we were taught that the earth was 70,000 years old instead of just a few thousand years old. And in 1905, the age of the earth was officially 2 billion years old. And in 1969, the official age of the Earth and Moon was reported by the Minneapolis Tribune as being supposedly 3.5 billion years old, dated with potassium argon dating. And in 2011, or today, students are being taught that the Earth is 4.6 billion years old. And that means that the Earth has been getting older at the rate of 21 million years per year for the last 220 years. Or it's been aging 40 years per minute. Now, as the article states, that's inflation, or an inflation of the age of the Earth. But no matter how many times they add years on to the age of the Earth, we're supposed to accept the information that they present as being accurate or factual. Although there is a major difference between 70,000 years and 2 million years, just as there is a major, major difference between 3 billion and 4 billion. But we are supposed to just accept this as being scientifically accurate, factual information. But like I've said, there are facts and there is truth. And what is presented as fact is not always the truth. Like in 1985, it was a fact that Pluto was a planet. But now they're telling us that Pluto, in fact, is not a planet. So you can't always trust these facts that they present as being truth. And why do they keep adding more and more time to the age of the Earth? Well, you see, they keep adding more time to make their evolution theories look more reasonable. Like, no one's going to believe that modern man, less than 10,000 years ago, evolved from some primate, ape-like creature. But if they say that this happened, let's say, over 1 million years, or over 1 billion years, a long time ago, maybe people will fall for that.
The teaching of evolution, in and of itself, is a form of creationism. Evolution is part of a religious tenet in Hinduism and the New Age movement that traces all the way back to the pharaohs in Egypt. It's called spiritual evolution. A tenet in Hinduism teaching that a spirit comes to this planet, and when this spirit becomes life on earth, it takes form of a lower life form. And when this spirit dies, it reincarnates, evolving up higher into the next highest stage of species, and does this on and on and on in the cycle of life We know this cycle of life is represented by the swastika on the walls of the Egyptian tombs, carried over into Hinduism and the Tibetan faith as the Tibetan swastika, representing this cycle of life. The spirit continuously evolves upward through a process of reincarnation and coming back to Earth, going through the species. This term is called transmigration in the New Age movement. Eventually, this spirit is supposed to evolve up through reincarnation, continually reincarnating and coming back to Earth until it finally reaches the human stage. And here is where the racist tenet of this religion comes in, saying that the spirit starts out, after reaching human form, in the, quote, lesser evolved human races. Quoting Charles Darwin in his book, In the Descent of Man, where he says, quote, the Caucasian race is the highest evolved race. And a few chapters later, Charles Darwin says, eventually the highest evolved races will annihilate the lesser evolved races. These are racist statements by Charles Darwin in his book, In the Descent of Man. Many only know his book, Origin of Species. It would behoove the science community to read all of Charles Darwin's books and find out what his religious basis was for writing his teachings on evolution. It came from Hinduism. The Nazi Party used Charles Darwin's books to help de-Christianize Nazi Germany, bringing in Middle Eastern religions and the New Age movement, teaching spiritual evolution. On the teaching of spiritual evolution, once this spirit has evolved upward into a human, as they said, the, quote, lesser evolved human races, which they meant to mean the minority race, then the spirit evolves upward into a white male, the Aryan, then supposedly into a God-man, which in Hinduism they have many people that are worshipped as a god on earth. They're Brahmins. They're New Age gurus. We know of Sai Baba, Maharishi. These people are worshipped as a god on earth. The next stage that they teach in this evolution of spiritual evolution is then on into a god. Again, this can be traced back to the pharaohs of Egypt, worshipped as a god on earth. Darwin and Morton used the teaching of spiritual evolution, trying to prove their racist theories and false religion to be the truth. It was not science. And we know this now, that their theory was disproven, that minority races were subhuman or lesser evolved humans, as through genetic studies where they have identified the Neanderthal gene, and it was more common in the Caucasian race, some up to 40% Neanderthal genes, as Neander Valley is in the Bavarian area, a mostly Caucasian-based region. This proves the Neanderthal gene was not in the minority races. Citing my sources, Nova, Science Now, and Nova's video called Decoding Neanderthals. We know now that their teachings were false. Many in the New Age movement do not realize that their teachings of a human evolving into a god, or becoming a god-man here on earth, or evolving into a god after death, has racist tenets involved. If one would note that in Wicca and other New Age religious beliefs, when they are talking about their familiar spirits, working with the familiar and sending them to carry out spiritual assignments, note that in some of the Wiccan books, they refer to these familiar spirits as a lesser evolved human spirit, because it's a standard tenet in Wicca to believe in spiritual evolution. They're just not bringing out the racial aspects that are hidden in that religious faith. as many cults do not come up front and tell you all that they believe. They move up through levels or degrees, such as Scientology, Wicca, Freemasonry, and other cults. But note that religious tenet of spiritual evolution is underlying there beneath the surface. Many note in the teaching that one evolves into a god that this false spiritual evolution teaching is inside of Mormonism and the Latter-day Saints, teaching that the white Caucasian male evolves into a god. And we know this from the civil rights lawsuits back in 1975, where racial minorities sued the Mormon Church because they were not allowed inside the temple. Until 1975, a racial minority was not allowed inside the Mormon temple. They treated them like subhuman, lesser evolved humans. Again, this false doctrine and false teaching is not compatible with the Bible, and it is not science. It's based from a religious tenet inside Hinduism that traces all the way back to the Egyptian faith. Note that in the scientific community, the carbon dating system is a joke. Many have sent in rocks and gotten a certain date for when they believe this rock to have been formed or how old this rock is. Send the rock back in again and get a totally different date. The carbon dating system has certainly never been accurate. And many know this that are in the debate between creationism and evolution. Even though evolution is part of a religion, the scientific community refuses to admit to such, that it was based out of a religious belief and a religious tenet that was used to justify racism, being a part of Hinduism that was brought into Nazi Germany, as most scientists want to see it as science. Remember, history repeats itself when you do not teach what actually happened in the past and why it happened. Pass on the knowledge to your children that Charles Darwin made racist statements in his book In the Descent of Man, and that there were many other racist writings by him and Morton that were used in Nazi Germany to coerce the public against the racial minorities. It was brought in under the guise of Hinduism and their teaching of spiritual evolution, bringing in the New Age movement. We see something closely akin to that in the United States New Age movement. We've seen many articles in magazines such as New Age magazine about many who identify themselves as a god on earth, that they have evolved upwards into a god, setting themselves a little above other people. Remember, this is the oldest lie Satan has ever told. That's what Satan told Eve in the Garden of Eden. You can be like God.